What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Major Keyz podcast with your host, Zach Wilson, talking to keyboard players about music and life and everything in between. Today, we have a special guest, Mr. Nicholas Semrad.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yo. How's it going, bro?
I'm good. I'm on the path to becoming well caffeinated. So that means
Ah,
I'm great for now and I'll be tired in 4 hours.
gotcha. But yeah, man. Let's just get started from the top, bro. How did you get started in music, and how did you get started playing keys?
Yeah, so my family was pretty musical. My dad was did some recordings. He had a band in the 60s that was on some like Motown stuff. And I always give him shit because he was a one-hit wonder. Like he had a song on Billboard, but that was the only song ever. But did a lot of touring and was on American Bandstand and did some cool stuff. And like both grandmas were piano players at church. My mom played piano, so there was just a lot happening. Grandpa played tuba and stuff like that. And so they got me. My grandma actually taught piano, but my parents were cool enough to kind of realize that like learning from a grandma is different than learning from someone else, like
Mm-hmm.
outside the family. So I did lessons. I did classical lessons, Suzuki piano starting when I was 3. And I had a really kind of interesting upbringing because I was getting trained in classical and, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Suzuki piano, but it's very ear training based. Like they spend the
Interesting.
first probably 3 or 4 years, and I started when I was 3.5.
Okay.
So a lot of like, I mean, things that we, now are just simple, but like a baby, essentially, a little kid is gonna have a hard time with like which of these notes is lower, or like if I play really low and then even lower or whatever. Um,
Interesting.
and
Okay.
so just doing stuff like that. So I was getting that training, but also my dad at the time was playing in cover bands around bars and stuff like that.
And your
And
dad played keys?
so he was a singer and a guitar player when I started playing music. He played trumpet back in the day, but was
Okay.
doing just cover band, like classic rock cover band gigs. So I kind of came up in the planet of learning the discourse of a gigging musician when I was really young. Like I think I was
Interesting.
playing
Yeah.
with my dad when I was 7 or 8. And we're playing like, not hard music, but you're playing like the Mustang Sallies and the Louie Louies and the 3 chord songs that usually people are learning first when they're 15, 16. I was learning when I was 4 or 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I got a cool kind of like double upbringing where it was like, soul music, Motown and R&B, and also like classical and technique and playing scales and blah blah blah. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it was cool.
Oh, yeah. Because that's interesting. Because usually it's like a lot of the stories I get is like, oh, yeah, I started at church. I get
Hmm.
that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get those stories a lot. Or I
Mhm.
get, I was only allowed to play classical music, or I learned by ear that, but I've never heard the story of like, oh, yeah, I learned ear training when I was 4 years old.
Yeah,
You
yeah. It
know?
was, I think a lot of people who grew up playing in church, you're also getting that particular genre of musician is also getting ear training.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I'm getting it on kind of like a very direct theoretical level.
Yeah.
Um, by just learn, it's like being told when you're 5, like transcribe this 3 note line over and over again, and here's how you do it, and here's why you do it. I don't know if one of those ways is better than the other, but
Right.
I feel like I definitely became more like it probably shaped a little bit of how I look at music, like in a process-based thing rather than just kind of like being in it. But
Yeah.
all in all, we ended up in the same place.
Yeah, for sure. Did you did you think you liked it at first, or was it just like in your earliest memories, did you
Man.
like it, or was it just like, oh, this is just something that I'm kind of doing this is just my
Man, I
life.
mean,
Yeah.
like every musician, I think there's phases of everything. You know, you start and you're like, oh, there's this new toy I have, essentially, like the piano or whatever, which is cool. And then you start kind of interacting with how people perceive you when you're
Mhm.
doing it. You know, like when you're, especially like I grew up in a really small town. It was like Fremont, Nebraska, which is 26,000, I think, so pretty tiny.
Oh
And
wow.
the biggest city by us is Omaha, which isn't that big either. And so when you're a musician and you're five and you're able to like hear a song on the radio and play a melody, all of your friends love you.
Yeah.
And you know, when you get to the correct age, like girls love you. So there were definitely kind of like external perception based things happening that I, as one would when they're that age, enjoyed. So yeah, I never really had an issue with it. And I think also there was an interesting approach from my parents to not re there's always pressures of various kinds that you wrestle with, but
Hmm.
they didn't like make me do it to a certain extent.
Right.
You know, I think because they were musicians and they were always around that crew, there was probably some sort of like unsaid thing that I dealt with. But in general, it wasn't like you're going to this lesson and you have to or else you're punished. And I think a lot of kids get that when they're learning instruments.
Hmm.
Especially where I grew up in the Midwest, there was just a ton of like, we made our son take violin or made our daughter take oboe or whatever. And I think that anything you make a kid do that isn't in began by the kid, you know, by some curiosity or something, they're kids. They're gonna hate it. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful to have parents that kind of like loosely. It was like we're gonna gently nudge you, but
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't as direct and intense as some. So yeah, I think in general, I had a cool relationship with music for a long time.
Nice. So you were doing that like three, four, five. So like when you get older, like 6 to 10, 6 to 11, like what does that look like? And then also, do you think you remember when you decided, okay, I want to do music for real? Like this is what I want to do when I grow up. Or maybe was it that and then you just ended up being in
I think it was always there, man. I mean, like earliest memories for me are three-ish. And so by then I'm already in front of a piano and I'm receiving feedback and I'm hanging out with my parents, my dad, especially at gigs. So there was a lot of like world building musically anyway.
Mhm.
So I don't know that I ever saw a life without it, especially because my dad was making money doing it. I mean, he also was the vice president for a bank, so it was like he was the weekend warrior type of
Okay, yeah.
musician. But I was seeing like, oh, he's coming back and he's, you know, having the wads of cash. Like that seems cool.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you mean girls like me and I can make money? Yeah, I should probably do this.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, till I would say from beginning until early teens, it was kind of, you know, I was doing a little songwriting, and there's always stuff through schools where it's like play at the talent show or write some song, some dorky little song or something like that. So I'm sure, you know, a lot of that stuff happened, but I didn't really start like kind of having my own identity with it until probably like early teens.
Got you.
And
Yeah.
I got a lot of like blues music was pretty big in my upbringing, and there was some I say big, but like regionally big blues musicians that came out of Nebraska that I started to play with, and so we would do out of town dates like down in Kansas City and Lawrence, Kansas, and Iowa and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And that's kind of where I got beginning into like gig culture and oh I have to learn songs and oh I have to like practice in keys I don't know and started getting more serious a little bit and just kind of kept getting harder and more fun both at the same time from there.
Were you always did you ever have like a person so you did have a personal teacher?
Mhm.
Question mark. Did you had a personal teacher?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I took Suzuki classical for 15 years
Hmm.
from 3 to 18.
Yeah.
And then once I hit college age, I I started playing in this band. I went through a number of local bands and cool stuff like that, but I found a band. The name is hilarious, by the way. The name of this band was the Jazz Holes, which is just like rough.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And they didn't even play jazz. They were like a hippie. It was like a smart jazz band or jam band. So it's kind of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, but they the cool thing about that was like this is maybe the first time I had been in a group where every musician was kind of individually dedicated to like getting better and kind of like
Mm,
you have that little it gets a little sporty at that point. I'm extremely competitive, and I think that
yeah.
really pushed me. I'm like super competitive, and so having people in the band who are like, I took 6 lessons this month. How many did you take? Really made me go, okay, classical is cool, but now what can I do to kind of like, expand my gravitas, if you will.
Mm,
So there was a teacher in Omaha, Nebraska named Dana Murray, who he had lived in New York. He's a drummer, actually.
mm,
And he had toured with Wynton Marsalis. He toured with Nora Jones. Like he was like top of the New
yeah.
York echelon for like 4 or 5 years. And then I think went through some relationship things and moved back to Omaha. But so he's in Omaha teaching, and I started taking from him, and it was great because even though he wasn't a piano player, I think once you get to a certain level in music, you can kind of teach anybody anything. Like you just understand music. You like, even though he couldn't sit down and play particular things, he would say, well, here's what I would expect to hear in that environment. And I can tell that you don't have this, and you're strong at this. So he was really great at kind of not only showing me, really intense like jazz records and passages to learn and solos to
Mm,
transcribe, teaching me what transcription was,
mm,
um, but also working on, and this is probably the thing that's benefited me the most is like rhythmic accuracy and feel, like showing a keyboard player at the age of 19 how to become obsessed with and practice feel like that messed me up in the best way, for good. So yeah, I those are kind of the two biggest like private teachers I've had, and
yeah.
maybe the only two private teachers I've had over long periods of time.
Gotcha. Because you didn't go to like college for music.
I actually didn't get accepted into college for music.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I auditioned at I was for 1 year I was a musical theater vocal major.
Oh,
Eh,
wow. Interesting. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we'll
Yeah.
leave that part in the history. And and then I auditioned to be a piano player at the University of Nebraska, which is like the big school in
Hmm.
Lincoln. And they told me I wasn't classically versed enough, which is,
Little do
probably
they know.
partially yeah, I mean it's probably partially due to taste, but also partially due to the Suzuki thing is
Okay.
even though you're learning classical, you're learning ear more.
Like more like they want the like, hey, can I put this piece of paper in front of you and you
Yeah.
do it? Like
Yeah. Can I
they
like
don't want you to be able to, oh, I can listen, give me like two times to listen to it and I got it. They want you to be able
Yeah,
to.
and man, I even remember asking at some point, like during the audition, like, can I play you something I made up? And like, they could not have been less interested.
Yeah.
And then the next year, I was gigging with the professors, so I got my Michael Jordan high school moment.
Oh wow, it was quick because I was like, 'cause, I mean, like, look at you now, like you're
Nah,
doing
nah,
great.
it
So
worked out pretty quickly, I think.
nah, that's interesting. I want you to go back to so like we're still gonna get into your life and stuff, but I want you to touch on the like you said that teacher taught you how to be rhythmic, and you
Yeah.
said like yo like that changed your whole perspective. So like in what way did that like how did
Well,
that help you? And you can get technical if you
sure.
want to, you
Yeah,
know.
I think this is cool because it now that I've been around enough people who've grown up in different backgrounds, especially people who grew up in church, grew up with rock music, who are great rock musicians or whatever. Um, I think a lot of people do this without being taught it. I just was given a very direct way. So like imagine a gospel musician, like a 4-year-old who's trying to play piano. They grew up hearing the same hymn every day. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna go home and at some point they'll probably start singing the hymn to themselves. Then they sit in front of the piano and they like plunk it out until they figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you start like playing at church with people, or you start like playing along to records or stuff like that. All those things get you kind of to like having a feel, because you're playing something consistently over a long period of time. So you're like honing in on a sound. The thing that Dana, that teacher, gave me was kind of an expanded view of that, where he's saying like you can learn how to feel like anything you enjoy. So like if you hear a James Brown record,
Hmm.
you know, that feels a specific way. It makes you physically, not even music feel, it makes you physically feel a specific way. Or if you hear, he was really big on like Fela Kuti and stuff like that,
Yeah.
you know, Afrobeat stuff. And it's really, it has a very specific feel. Bob Marley has a very specific feel. You know, Miles Davis's band already had a very specific feel. So he was telling me like there's ways to kind of like muscle memory yourself into being able to access that feel whenever you want. So to me, him telling me that and telling me that the way to practice is by taking loops and playing along to them for hours. Like we would literally take the one I tell students all the time is this is the one I start with is the Payback by James Brown. Like that song has a very specific thing. Like there's a hump to it that it's unexplainable, but it's very unique and feels like James Brown and feels very powerful. Um, and you can microanalyze it a thousand different ways in terms of like, oh, the snare's slightly ahead and the kick's right on, the hi-hat slightly back, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the only way you're going to get it is by hyper focusing, hyper repetitive practice sessions that you're just doing that. You're not trying to solo over something. You're not trying to analyze it. You're just doing the thing so often that you can identify where all the kind of like inadequacies in the beat are and do them repetitively over time. So to me, that was a very strong thing because it was really repetitive. Or sorry, not really repetitive. It was really focused.
Hmm.
Like I could say, oh, I love this feel. If I want to be able to play like that, here's the exact path. And it's not some
Interesting.
indirect thing where I just happen to like, oh, I'm around it a lot, or you know, I played it once at this gig and then or played it once at church and then came home and thought about it and then just happened to do it a number of
Hmm.
times. No, I'm gonna get better at that today. Uh,
Interesting.
and it was, you know, that became a big part of my practice routine, like in my early 20s, especially, was finding records that felt great, finding 8 bar loops, 16 bar loops, something like that, and literally being like, all right, well, here's the next 2 hours, let's go. And there would be no fills, there would be no soloing. It's like,
Nothing.
nope,
Just
you know, and it became a huge part of my practice. And I think probably something that has served me the most overall, the chords, overall the lines. It's that stuff because that's the stuff you do the most when you play music, you know?
wow. Okay. That takes a
Yeah.
lot of dedication because like after about I to play the same to play the same exact thing for hours on end. I
Yeah.
know me personally, I would end up like if my teacher was like, "Oh yeah, play the same thing." I'm like, "Hey, look at this lick that I
Yeah. Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
look at
Yeah.
this this quote from this other." That's just how I work. I'm like, this
Yeah.
lick from this other song works in the same key. Like you weren't supposed to do that, but
Yeah. Well, there's some part of it where I think you have to, you know, you only really want to get better at things you love.
mm,
Like anyone that says, "Oh, I want to get better at feel," but if they don't love feel, then all the work to get better at feel, they're gonna be like, "Oh, this is a chore," and they're gonna hate it. So
yeah,
there's semblance of like, well, you probably like it, but like you're not obsessed with it.
mm,
Whereas like when I would play along to James Brown records, or I mean, I don't even love reggae, but like there's a couple like Babylon by Bus, I think it's called, a Bob Marley record. Like that record is crazy. And it
mm,
just I was like, man, this whole thing like makes me like my body's going like this, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
body's like just I'm like, why am I like moving weird? And it's because the music like caused it. So I wanted to be able to access that and not only make myself do that when I play, but make other people do it. And so I think that thing when you connect the output to the thing that you're working on, it's
mm,
like, oh, well, I'm just getting better at making myself feel good, you
mm,
know? And you can get, I mean, it doesn't have to just be with Phil. I mean, you can do that with synth practice, you can do that with songwriting, you can do that with soloing. Like there's a thousand ways to do it. And I think that one I just you know, I latched onto it and I have the type of mind that can kind of like lose myself in a thing. And sometimes having like less stuff to think about is actually more comforting to me. So
yeah.
it was weird, it just kind of lined up. It was like, oh, this is stuff that I can do for a long period of time. I don't feel crazy when I'm done, and it's giving me a useful tool. Great. Let's
Yeah,
go. You know?
it seems like you really like had that self-awareness of like, okay, or you really or if someone told you that you like just really took into consideration, hey, your field could be better. Like, was it a self-aware thing or was it someone that
I think it
told
was
you?
both. I mean,
Okay, yeah.
I think if someone tells you something that you don't feel, that's not going to resonate. And if sometimes there's things you do feel that you aren't sure how to harness. And so I had both where it was like, oh, I feel the power of having groove. I mean, it sounds corny to say, but like there is a
Mm,
thing of like, I don't even need to solo to make you move. Like I
right.
can play in a very specific way. I can play very simply, and I'm gonna make your whole body do this. And like I'm gonna change the air of the room.
Mm,
Like to me that was awesome. And then someone also who I respected intensely told me like, yeah, that's what all the cats do who are like doing really well. And for the most part, that has kept consistent. I mean, all the people who I respect the most musically, like, have insane feel and have practiced it in some sort of similar. It might not be the exact path I did, but like
yeah.
they've done something similar.
Mm. Wow. Cool, man. So that's like age 19, 20-ish. So like did you start touring early or were you just gigging around
No,
Nebraska?
I was
Did
I
you
was a late
move?
bloomer.
Okay, yeah. So like
So
give
I
me
didn't.
like what was your life between like kind of like 1920 and before the Funk Apostle started? Like give me kind of
Yeah.
that what was going on in between there?
So I didn't move to New York until I was 27. So I had a whole like
I was
kind of
27 in June, bro.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, there was like a whole kind of early adulthood where I was in the Nebraska Midwest music scene. And, it was cool. Like there's a lot of parts of it that I loved. And I think learning how to live as a gigging musician where you're just like taking everything you can get and doing 1,000 things at once. Like I think
Hmm.
that's a great skill set.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was doing like rockabilly gigs. I was doing indie rock gigs. I had like a little couple indie rock bands that would tour around and do the local circuit and all that stuff. I was playing at all these like just hella white churches, like a lot of white. I didn't even get into non-white church music until like 26-ish or so. But yeah, just doing like every type of gig I could possibly do and scrounging by and did a few festival hits now and then, but yeah, I didn't really start getting into like bigger music stuff until I got out of Nebraska.
Yeah. Were there any of those that were just like because like I don't even think I know anybody from Nebraska. I don't even know if I
Nobody
know
does.
anyone who's
There's
been to
10 of us.
Nebraska. Yeah. So was it like when you're talking about those different types of gigs, were there any of those it's just like, dog, I'm just doing it? Or what was your favorite type of gig to do? I want to ask you what your least favorite was. What was your favorite type
Well,
of gig
I
to
mean,
do
I
like during
mean,
that time?
yeah, I mean, I think, I was also like partying pretty heavy during that time. So I think any gig that was like early in the day probably was a little tough. But yeah, I think man, one of my favorite, I mean, all the stuff with the jazz hole guys, like even though the name is weird, they're still all like lifelong friends and they're still all incredible musicians. And actually the guitar player from that band was Corey's first guitar player, Andrew Bailey.
Oh,
Uh,
nice. Yeah,
yeah, he was in that band too. So like all those guys, I think just being in a band where you're all kind of like pushing each other, and
yeah.
it
Hmm.
wasn't always like the emotionally healthiest way to do it, but there is some power to like, nah, like you're not good enough, like get better. And we were all kind of doing that, but we were friends too.
Hmm.
So anything with those guys was great. Playing with my dad is always cool. I mean, it was like 1,000 small gigs, and they all had things that were neat.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, nothing really. It was like everything was kind of cool, informative, and it's a really fun time in people's lives, I think, because they're trying to figure out what they love.
Hmm.
Like you're doing a little, like there was definitely a part of my life where I was like, man, I could just tour as a blues musician and play these blues circuits and play every Friday and Saturday night. And I
Hmm.
wasn't even aware that there was stuff like what I'm doing now, or like
Yeah.
film scoring or sound design, or I didn't even know you could like teach online. There's 1,000 worlds you aren't,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just doing a lot of gigging, a lot of little small gigs, and
Hmm.
I liked a lot.
Yeah, man. So moving to New York. So
Mhm.
you moved to New York and you started this group The Lesson, or so how did that come about?
So yeah, it was very Kismet-ish. I'm Lenny Reese, the drummer, and Christian Almiron, the other keyboard player. I think I was like on my way to some again, some little I was still in gigging musician mindset where I'm like, I'm just doing every little songwriter thing I can. They saw me at like a restaurant before a gig getting a sandwich, and I had my Nord case on my back, like every New York keyboard player.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just pulled me aside, and both those guys are extremely personable and cool, and we just hit it off. And yeah, I started going to the jam session, and I think 2 or 3 weeks in, they asked me to be in it.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was a big part of my New York experience, and partially how I met Corey too was through that.
So for
Uh,
no, for someone who doesn't know about The Lesson GK, like explain the
yeah,
group, explain
yeah.
like
So the
musically
lesson
what's the
the lesson GK was slash is slash was slash is a group of humans who did. It's a band who did a jam session every week, and the jam session was called The Lesson. So weird, like band is called the jam session. But every week it was like improvised hip hop, which my ears hear that and I get really bored immediately.
interesting? Okay, yeah.
Because the whole night's, you're not covering things. Like you're just playing. It's like, all right, someone make up a hip hop tune. But the thing that was cool about the session was that for whatever reason, you could explain it 1,000 different ways, but everyone in the band was amazing at
Mhm.
that thing. And it also kind of just became a community. So there was like the house band would switch it up. Like there would be, if I wasn't there, Julian would be there, or if the bass player was gone, like I think we had a couple bass players, and then David Cutler became the bass player, and then he would sub out, and Antoine Katz would come in. There'd be all these other people, but it was cool because there's no material to learn. Like it's literally like get up and one person starts an idea. Um, and it got to the point to where I think just in my personal experience, I think a lot of people were coming to see the band and not even to jam because the band got so good at what it did,
Oh, okay.
where people were like, yeah, the jam is cool, but we kind of just want to watch the band like go off for like 3 hours. Um,
Yeah.
and it kept growing. We changed venues a couple times, and by the end of it, it was like, man, every week there was 200 to 300 people coming every week.
Whew,
There's like lines out the door, even when
that's
the
a
weather's
jam.
crazy. And it was, yeah, it was like it was the spot where all the musicians who are in town would come and play. Like if Glasper's coming in town, he's there. If Hiatus Coyote's coming in town, they're there. Chris Dave would roll through. Like you always had just killers in the room who would sit in at the end, and it was cool. And New York has an interesting lineage of like that type of event, and we were I think a very unique cog of that type of thing.
Got you. So that was like I didn't know how big it was. I think because I found out about it
Sure.
late. So I was
Yeah.
well, I mean like, but also I don't live in New York. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but I
It was
so that was
crazy,
like the
man. I
spot.
mean, it was really crazy, and it taught a bunch of like weird skills. Like I've been thinking a lot in my life lately about like how I've learned the shit I've learned because I think teaching is tough because so many people want like skills that we try to articulate in terms of things we just don't understand. So I'm trying to really understand like the things that I'm good at, where they come from. And I think the lesson gave me like some really interesting tools where, imagine you're at a jam session and you're being essentially told to write a song. Like this skill set applies to like production, it applies to scoring, it applies to
Mm,
songwriting, like it applies to all the stuff I'm doing now. But there it's like trial by fire because you have an audience,
okay.
so
Yeah.
we'd be in a situation where like another keyboard player would start playing a thing, and immediately I had to go, oh shit, okay, A, what key are they in? B, what can I play that doesn't affect what they play negatively?
Hmm.
Like how can I fit into this equation? And C, how can I keep it interesting? Like
Hmm.
whether it's sonically or chordally or whatever. And there's so many things that happen at a jam session like that that you just can't practice at home by yourself. You
Yeah.
can't really practice unless you have a band of killers in front of an audience. So that thing was really special, man. Like I think that has probably it probably pushed me ahead just as much as the instruction that Dana or my earlier piano teacher, Mrs. Moxness did.
Hmm. Yeah, you gotta speak to like some stuff you can't just learn at home. Like you got to go out and you just got to do it.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny, like Dana, the second teacher, he used to kind of say similar things where he's like, there's tiers of practice,
Hmm.
and you can't skip one. Like practicing at home is great, but you're not able to practice at home the things that you're going to encounter on stage.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to encounter a drummer fucking up or somebody slowing down or someone playing amazing shit but doing it in like a maybe they're altering time or something like that. Like there's just so many things you can't encounter because at
Yeah.
home is a very safe, controlled environment. Um, and so I think having this tier where you're like, yeah, I can get all this stuff handled at home. Like, I can work on technique, I can transcribe, I can learn tunes, records, whatever, play
Hmm.
on group stuff, feel stuff. But then I have to like practice applying it by applying it in a live setting.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that was happening at the lesson. And I tell my students that all the time, man. Like, it's very important to like have a community, if at all possible, where you can shed. And that's a church thing too, man. Like that's you hear about the sheds in church where it's like you get together and everyone's just like blasting fills and like
Hmm.
that's because it's the place to build that stuff, It's a safe environment where you're feeling how a crowd reacts to you playing something, or you're feeling how the band reacts to you playing something. I think those are, man, they're just super valuable. And the lesson was that for me.
Got you. Got you. And you said that's how you met Cory Henry.
So yeah, that was half of the way I met Cory. So Cory came to the lesson and was hearing me play there. And that was like that was maybe a year after I had turned into like synth guy and really started playing with that stuff more.
Hmm.
Because I didn't do that until I got to New York.
Oh, nice.
And
Okay, yeah. Of course, I was going to touch on that, but like
yeah,
we'll talk
yeah,
about Cory first, and then I'll get back to that.
yeah, yeah. So he was seeing me there, and then I had also started doing, I was playing at a church up there, a black church, and doing a lot of like gospel gigs, like little, there was like some kind of, I don't know what the word for it is, but like gospel artists going out and doing kind of nightclubby hits places.
Hmm.
So I was doing that kind of music. And he was on some of those things as well. And so we just met that way. And I think I met him at the perfect time because he was just kind of exiting the snarky thing.
Hmm.
Uh, and for whatever reason, I'm sure he's touched on at some point in his podcasts. But I think he wanted to like go a direction that was totally the opposite of snarky,
Hmm.
and I would like to think that I'm probably that direction
Interesting. Yeah.
because I don't like counting past four, and I like playing with a lot of reverb and weird pedals.
Funny.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so you because like I know I want to say the first Funk Apostle show, if I remember like seeing like visual, it was like a lot of y'all. I feel like it was
Yeah.
like two other keyboard players, and I feel so. Tell me, so I want to know your role in Cory Henry and the Funk Apostles,
Mm.
and well, just tell me that and like how it started, and kind of like how your role has differed because the band has changed from because I've seen y'all
Oh yeah.
almost like every iteration I think of the Funk
Yeah.
Apostles.
Yeah.
Like I saw y'all when y'all are like kind of avant-garde-ish in a way, going to like just the straight up funk, like when Traded All kind of came out like
Yeah.
20
Yeah. Yeah.
like so tell me about that. So
Pop
give me
funk.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
give me your perspective on Cory Henry and the Funk Apostles.
I mean, my role has always been cheerfully, I should say, to just support him. Like
Mm-hmm.
his from the early thing where he's essentially the singer, but here, like playing rather than singing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to now where he's the singer actually. Like I'm the keyboard player in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he'll say that. Like, we definitely have times where we're both playing parts or whatever, but I think my role is the prototype auxiliary guy,
Mm-hmm.
which I love. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah, and like you said, early band was pretty much a jam band where it's like, here's some forms, let's go off, play solos and blah blah blah. And now it's like tunes, like
Yeah.
tune. There's solo sections in the tunes, but they're way more like formed and
Mm-hmm.
we can play a song in 4 minutes now versus the 12 that they used to be.
Oh yeah, y'all had some stuff going on, man. I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed every version of it, you know, because
Thank
I was there the first tour that y'all came to Atlanta. It was the Detour. It was
you.
y'all, Ghost Note, Mark
Yeah,
Materi,
Terry's
and I
band.
was and I was there, and
Yeah.
so I've enjoyed every bit of it because like I love all of them. I love Corey, but like I remember when I saw you there, I was like, why does Corey need another keyboard player?
Yeah.
But like I heard you and it was like I've never heard anything like that.
I
And I was
appreciate
just like, dog, like now I'm like, I hope Nick is there. Because there
it.
was one time like it was at an Atlanta show and it
Mm,
was like you were coming from somewhere else. I feel like it was like two tours that kind of I was like, dog,
yeah.
I hope that Nick is there because like I really like,
Yeah, yeah.
become one of my favorite parts of the band. So how did you get into like the synthesis crazy crazy pedal sort of
Man,
situation that you kind of do and explain it to people who don't really know what it might be.
yeah. So that I mean, even that shifts so much over time. But like I began that stuff. I have to give full credit to Big Yuki. His real name is Masayuki Hirano, but he's a keyboard player in New York who is if you don't know Big Yuki, check out Big Yuki.
Mm.
Like he's one of the baddest musicians I've ever played with. Like that I think I've ever heard. Like I would put him in the top echelon of like he's easily up there to me with the Glaspers and the Bill Evanses, and he's
Oh
not a
wow.
jazzer. I think I'm pretty sure he's Japanese. And man, he's just this like, how can you even describe Yuki? His playing is like it's very classical,
Mm-hmm.
but he's doing it from this like edgy, aggressive, like hip hop tinged kind of like dark gothic thing. Like
Interesting. All right.
he's just insane.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember hearing him at the jam session. Like, remember how I said there's a lineage of that kind of thing?
Yeah.
The one before us was called Freestyle Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
And same vibe, very different sound, very different band, but same vibe where that was the session that everyone would go to and sit in at, and all the R&B and hip hop people would roll through. And he was the keyboard player there. And I remember seeing him play like a Prophet 6 and a reverb pedal and just being like so expressive
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I had just never encountered before. He's playing lines, he's like kind of doing alt techniquey things. And so it really urged me to just buy a synth and because I wanted to be Yuki.
Yeah.
uh, like happens. I mean, granted, I was 27 at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
because that was my first experience in New York, was seeing that kind of thing. uh, I was acting as if I was a teenager seeing a rock star for the first time. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I see this thing that I can't explain, and it's really making me feel really intensely. I want to emulate the shit out of it. And so I did that for a number of years, was like trying to be Yuki, and eventually figured out my own sound. But yeah, I blame my getting into synthesis on that gentleman right there. And
Nice.
there's a ton of, New York has so many great electronic musicians. Like Jason Lindner lives up there and he's way more into pedals and stuff. But yeah, just for people that don't know, I I really am into playing synths through effect pedals, and
Mm-hmm.
I try to manipulate the synth and the pedals as much or more than the actual keyboard part. Like I would rather take a solo where I hold a chord with the sustain pedal and turn a bunch of knobs than actually play a bunch of lines. It's just
Yeah,
more
yeah,
fun.
yeah. But
But they both have
also
a place.
playing the lines is very dope.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm just saying, like
I
it's
like
not.
to
I'm like, let's not get it confused as if you can't. But it's just like,
I like to
I
have both.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because but yeah, man, like I said, like the first time I heard it, I was just like, wow, this is and it was super complimentary. So was it any pressure playing behind Corey like when you met him? Because like at that time when the Funkapos kind of started, this is like hot off of the Lingus solo. And like you're just kind of like meeting him and you're like, dog, like what would you like what was the
Man,
reaction to getting asked to play with him, especially like kind of like at that time.
yeah, of course. I mean, that's a great question. He's a superhero, and I had been listening to him since I was young, and he's younger than me. Yeah, I think he's 4 years younger than me, I think.
Hmm.
Uh, but I when I hit that band that I was with in Nebraska, we were like, check out this Cory Henry Nat Townsley video, and we're like,
Oh, that one.
we're like, what the hell is happening? Like, how do you even
Hmm.
do that?
Hmm.
So it was crazy, and playing with people like that becomes a beautiful experience where you're kind of forced to acknowledge uh, the things that you need to acknowledge about yourself. And I think I respected and still, I mean, he's one of the greatest people apart from just being a musician. He's one of the greatest people in the world on the planet. But I think I respected him so much where I would screw up something and just be like, oh my God, I let him down, or
Hmm.
like, I would definitely feel that like, oh, Corey's taking all these solos and everyone's like freaking out, and then I play and like no one gets it. That kind of energy. So there was a lot of that at first.
Hmm.
Um, and there was a definite path. I'm glad all that happened because and I'm glad that he's a great person and great friend because through not only him kind of like reassuring me like no actually I think you're incredible, it allowed me to see some of that stuff in myself.
Hmm.
uh, and now I'm able to kind of speak to like, well, I know what I'm good at, and him and I don't have to be good at the same things. And
Hmm.
it's a really beautiful thing to realize because that applies to so many other things in life. I mean, it applies to relationships. Like if your partner is organized and you're not, like some part of that is okay,
Hmm.
like or even just interpersonal relationships. But yeah, it really taught me a lot about like learning to investigate the things I'm dealing with and what do they mean in the grander, the greater scheme of things. But yeah, there was a lot of early like, oh shit, I have a bit of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
happening. I'm like, you can have any musician on the planet, like why am I here? And then your head goes to all the dark places, like maybe I'm here because he can afford me and he can't afford you go all
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. I got
which
you.
it's never true.
Hmm.
But like that's where I was going at some point. So yeah, it was quite the path, man. But I give him credit for being like an incredible band leader because him along with the rest of the people in the band
Right.
became pretty good friends of mine and were able to kind of like, boost you when you need it, check you when you need it. And it's kind of like a beautiful chaos, man. Like there's definitely been times now in the past couple of years where I'm like, oh, I'm the shit, like it's
Hmm.
like the reverse where I'm like, I'm so good, and then you hear him do something and you're like, oh, I'm not that good. Like, oh, okay. So it's a cool back and forth, man. It's really fun.
Got you. Yeah, man. Like I said, like I knew about Corey before the Funk Apostles came along.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, like I've always enjoyed watching y'all. Like when it started from the avant-garde stuff, and I remember the first time. What's the song that I told you that I liked? It's the one. Dun 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 dun
Yeah,
dun ba
leather
ba bum
jacket,
ba dun 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 dun
leather
dun ba
jackets,
ba
man.
ba. It was one of those songs, but I messed with you about it because I was like, oh man, do that one. But you were like, I don't like that one.
Dude, that's
But
that's the
yeah, yeah, that
yeah.
one, that
Yeah.
one. But now, like from there, from like what? Because like y'all toured for like 4 years with no album, which is
Yeah.
wild,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So coming from that, and then in the middle, I don't know when Lauren Hill was, but you played with Lauren Hill. So talk about that. Playing behind someone of that magnitude. We don't have to get into
Yeah.
the negatives, but like tell me,
Yeah.
but like tell me about like because that's a totally different type of gig than I think any of the other ones that you kind of
It
have
it
done.
kind of it kind of happened around the same time. I think it may have even been like pretty close to our first tour that I did that. I'm not totally certain of the dates, but it was they were kind of connected.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, man, I mean, I I've told it like this before, where there's not too many people that I've played with that make me feel like I'm going to battle and I want to like fight for them. And
Mhm.
she had that energy. It's like when things are good, they're not always good because she's, got a lot. She's a very intense personality. But when they're good, they're very powerful. It's like you're on stage and you're like, damn, I'm incredible because she's making me feel that right now. Like
Mhm.
her energy is so intense.
Mhm.
And it's really, I mean, it's cool to be around, man.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I mean, she's a legend and she's a legend for a reason, and she still has a lot of the tools that made her a legend. Yeah, so it was a really blessed experience. Like I really,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, yeah, and I loved playing that music. And the band was crazy. Like everyone in the band was incredible. Spanky was on drums,
Right.
Matthias Loescher on bass, Matthias Loescher on guitar, Jay Rosado on bass,
Mhm.
hella horn players, incredible singers. Like it was great.
Yeah. Nice, man. So, and this is now we're gonna get into a couple of questions. I ask everyone who comes on the
Sure.
podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
What is the worst gig that you've had, or what is the worst thing that's happened to you on a gig?
Oh my lordy. There's hundreds. I'm thinking of like innocent ones that won't get anyone into trouble.
Oh yeah, please, like, let's try not to incriminate anybody. But if you do, like, my views could go up.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. There was a gig in 2021 in February with Mark Juliana's band. Shout out to Mark.
hmm
Incredible band, incredible musician called Beat Music. It's like experimental dub reggae, but like he's one of the best jazzers in the world. So like
yeah.
the improvising was crazy. And it was like first gig back after the pandemic. We're playing this festival down in like Miami or something like that. I think it was
hmm
Miami. Um, and the festival is supposed to be like 10,000 people. It's like first thing back, supposed to be crazy. And then there was like a huge COVID outbreak like the week before or something like that.
mm
So the festival went from it had like 10,000 people that they were expecting to I think like 180 attended. And it's at this like huge like sports park kind of thing. So it's one of those gigs where you could literally like pinpoint every face.
Wow.
So we're playing, you're playing to like no one, which is weird. But the gig itself was cool. The thing that made it rough was that it was like 108 degrees, and
Ah.
I've never had a synth like slowly die before.
Oh no.
And just the synth got so hot. I was playing the Pro 3, the sequential one, this guy, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, just like mid gig, or I guess it was mid to late sound check. Like as I was playing, it was just slowly detuning, and then the
Oof.
lights like kind of go all fucked up. Yeah, so I think we ended up having to like we put like an industrial size fan on it. So I'm playing this whole gig with like this fan energy behind. Like it's
That's
tough.
rough.
Yeah, so
And
playing in that weather, getting crushed because my white skin is getting destroyed in the sun, and I'm wearing like that band wears like yellow pajamas, so we're in like
oh yeah, y'all
full
do have
outfit.
the fit. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
we're
then
like,
also and then nobody's there.
and yeah, and no one's there, and I'm not gonna say his name, but there was like a pretty big musician that like a pretty well-known musician there, like pop star guy who's friends with the band, and he was just like in the middle by himself, just like screaming and really messed up. Like, yeah, it was
What
like,
I would know who this person is.
yeah, yeah.
Message this person message
I'll tell you after.
message the name to me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
it was.
great.
Yeah, it was. So that was crazy. I mean, and there's always like I I guess a really just as far as a moment goes, like I don't really have like terrible gigs anymore, but there's definitely moments where it's like, oh, this
Right.
was cool. There was a moment down in it was a famous jazz festival in California. I can't think of the name of it. But anyway, it's a Clint Eastwood is like the guy who runs the festival. It's like his thing.
Okay.
Um and we were playing and Clint Eastwood is like in the front row and Cory has this at the time we were playing like this Marvin Gaye cover, and Cory takes this big thing in the middle where it's just him.
The what's
And
going on deal?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he just, he does all his Cory isms and
Mhm.
impresses everyone. And it's amazing. It's hard, but he's crying. Everyone's crying. I remember getting so like emotional at what he was playing that I like forgot what key we were in.
Mm.
And so he's like, band, come in 3, 4. And I came in just in like the not at all right
Oh,
key. And I just see Clint go, like,
yikes.
oh, yeah, cool.
Took you out of this. I mean, like, there's something about like missing a cue, but coming in and like, oh, dog, what was I
Yeah,
doing?
just
That's
forgetting
crazy.
like
Yeah.
what song, like
Mm.
yeah, I can't even blame Cory on that. I was just out. I was somewhere else.
That's crazy. No, those are good stories though. Those are good stories. top three, like national keyboardists, like legends, and then like top three keyboard players that you know and can
Word,
call
yeah,
like in that you can call up. If you want to do more than three to,
even
I
out.
forgot this person. Yeah, if you want to do that, you can do that. But
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, I feel like I have to section it off because they're so, it just really depends on like phases of my life, really.
hmm
But I would say like Bill Evans,
hmm
probably. Like I think I have to put Bill in front of Herbie, which hurts me to do. But yeah, I say probably Bill Evans. Man, there's just so many killers. Meldau for sure. And I want to say like a non-jazzer. I mean, man, like I think his later music was not my favorite stuff, but I think someone like Stevie is probably has to go there because he's playing like synth and he's playing like the craziest clav shit. Like his clav stuff is
oh
just
yeah.
nuts. So yeah, I mean, I think there. I mean, that's ignoring just synth. Like you have the Bernie Worrells and all the synth planet. That's
hmm
a totally different vibe. But I think those three probably like shape me the most. And then local people, man. I mean, Yuki's got to be up there. I can't
hmm
stress enough like how formative playing with him was. We actually got to tour together in Mark Giuliano's band, which was crazy. So we got to go at each other a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think him. I gotta say Jake Sherman. You familiar with Jake's music
I
at
feel like
all?
I've heard the name. I don't really
He-
know a lot about him.
He's nuts, man. He's like one of these cats who just I've never heard him play not the perfect thing. Like he's just super tasteful.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, he's toured with like Michelle and Cello.
hmm
His own music is really incredible too. It's like if Ben Folds was like a smarter player, that's what his stuff sounds like.
hmm
So yeah, those two, and then man, just all the lesson cats were really formative. I mean, like Julian J3PO,
Yeah.
Christian Almiron, Jason Lindner was kind of a part of that hang.
hmm
Yeah, there's like 18 of them, and I'm just spacing on everyone's name. But
hmm
yeah, all those lesson guys, like they each had their own thing that they were like really good at, and I was just getting like beat up with it every day. And so I think seeing that stuff really shaped me. But yeah, I think those are probably. I'm gonna be so mad that I think of someone like the second we're done that I did shout out.
It
But
happens a lot.
yeah, those are some big starters for sure. And I'm very intentionally leaving Corey out of the list because obviously he's one of the greatest of all time. But yeah, I think that's a few of them.
Fair enough. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So here's the situation. You could be curating this party, curating this event, whatever. You could put together a super group. You do not have to
Mhm.
be in this group. Everyone just has to be alive. There's unlimited availability and unlimited budget. So rhythm section, if you want to do singers, you can do no no no. Rhythm section, if you want to do horns, you can do horns. And who are they and who is this band backing up?
Oh,
You don't have to do one of each instrument, but you can
yeah.
pull this keyboard player from this group, this bass player from this group, whatever, whatever. They just have to be alive. And
It's
it can
so
be whatever type of music you want.
it's so interesting because to me, like I'm in this headspace where I'm gonna preface my answer with something just so it makes sense. But
Yeah.
earlier today I was uh just giving my dad shit because he was making fun of like Travis Scott, right? He was like, I
Oh,
don't get it. Like,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
a typical like old like dude from Nebraska. Like my dad's an amazing musician, but I understand why he doesn't like Travis Scott. But
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to give him this whole thing that I've been thinking about lately, that I actually heard from a friend of mine was telling me this about trap music. Danny Garibay, he produces all of Corey's records, but he was saying like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I hated trap music for a long time until I went to a very specific club with my now wife, and then he heard it in the light in which it was meant to be heard, and
Mm-hmm.
he was like, oh shoot, like now I get it, like
Mm-hmm.
totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking about like the example I gave my dad was like I grew up hearing Leonard Skinner all the time. I was like,
Yeah.
Freebird's great, yeah, cool. But I don't want to hear Freebird while I'm getting a massage,
Right.
and so I'm very invested in the idea that like the perfect music has to coincide with the perfect atmosphere because they're not always going
Mm-hmm.
to line up. Like
Okay.
chord span's amazing, but we, like seeing us play at an old folks home, it probably isn't going to be that cool, you know,
Yeah.
like just a different thing happening. So some of it depends on the party.
You
Um,
can make it. This is you.
any party, right?
Build, paint the picture. Paint the picture.
Yeah. So I feel like probably the greatest. I'm just gonna recreate the greatest show I've ever seen because I think that's the ultimate thing. Like, I think it's cool to share an experience of like something that's as all embracing as possible that everyone can kind of like celebrate and freak out to, right? And I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of genres that like exclude certain people, not because of the genre, but just because of their background or because of the type of things they listen to. So my mentality goes towards like, what's the thing that the most people I know love?
Hmm.
And I think like the Beatles. Like, there's not too many people that don't love the Beatles. There's a couple, I can think of a couple,
Hmm.
but for the most part, the Beatles had it, they have like their kind of weirdo drug era, they've got the metal era, they've got pop tunes, they've got these anthem, like really intense things.
Hmm.
And uh like I saw Paul McCartney last year live, and he's like 1,000 years old, but his band was killing.
Yeah.
Like it's just perfect. It's like every member of the band is like incredible at the thing they're doing.
Hmm.
So even though I would love to see like some weird interaction between like, yeah, what if James Brown and Freddie Mercury interacted? Like, like or like what if Radiohead decided to do like a set with Erykah Badu? There's all kinds of cool mashups.
Mm.
I think the collective, like, I just want all my friends in a room, like, screaming songs that we've all heard 1,000 times. And the Beatles, whether or not you involve John or the people who are past John and George, like, the Beatles just have those tunes. Like
Mm.
someone like Taron Lockett and I, we have violently different backgrounds, but he knows all those Beatles songs. Corey knows all those Beatles songs. Like
Hmm.
Mark Juliano knows all those Beatles songs. So I feel like that would be my party, man. It's like let's just get the Beatles and maybe we'll add the session musicians that made them killing. Like maybe Bernard Purdy's kind of like snuck in the background in
Yeah,
case
yeah. I'm like, because like the
you know?
caveat is they have to be alive. That is the
Yeah,
caveat.
yeah. Oh, they have to be
So
alive.
you've
Okay.
got so you got Paul McCartney,
So
right?
so I would take Paul McCartney's band
Yeah.
and then I would literally have Corey play keys with him.
That's like the most creative and thought out answer that I think I've had on the show. Or it's got because like everyone that I have is like, oh man, I could do gospel, I could do jazz, I could do R&B, like but like I like
The community part.
the perspective of the answer was super cool.
And
So no, I
I
appreciate it.
think
Yeah,
it applies too to, I like to, I'm a big basketball nerd.
yeah.
I think you can make a sports analogy where it's like the super team kind of sucks most of the time.
Hmm.
Like you could have Miles Davis on trumpet and you could have Bernard Purdy on drums and you could have Steve Vai on guitar and you could have like Beethoven on piano, like all this stuff. There's got to be something that not only holds them together, but holds the people listening to it together too.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's why I mean, man, I think the Paul McCartney featuring Corey Henry. I mean, Corey's so versatile he can go damn anywhere, but
Yeah.
like he's essentially filling the Billy Preston role,
Yeah.
and he would be fine with that because Billy's one of his top of all time.
Yeah, man. Cool, bro. Couple of things. Two more things, and then I'll get you
Yeah.
out of here. What do you think is your goal overall, like musically? What things do you think you want to do musically that you haven't done yet?
Oh, things I want to do that I haven't done yet. Um, I would love to be, and I'm starting into this planet a little bit, but I would love to like really be involved with a score, like a heavy score, like a
Mm.
film score. Like I've worked on some movies, and I've been working with this gentleman, Chris Bowers, who's an incredible film score. He's
Jeez,
winning
he's
all these
good.
awards. Yeah, Chris is
I know who Chris is. Yeah.
yeah, Chris is crazy. And so I'm on his sound design team now, which is rad. So I'm working on a lot of movies and stuff like
Dope.
that. And I don't necessarily want to be in charge of the scoring, but I want to be the guy who's like, I want to be like the VP of that
Hmm.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
let's do a film, you score it, but I'm there with sound design stuff, like right from the beginning. Maybe I'm helping score. Like, I think that would be really neat. Winning a Grammy would be pretty rad too. I've
Yeah.
got two near misses.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm like, dog, because you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm cool with one of the losses. The other one, I'm like, man, I think we should have won that one, but it's a
I think
separate.
I might. I can look back at the ones and like I think I know which ones you might be talking.
Yeah, well,
I can
yeah,
pinpoint which ones you're talking about. But
yeah.
hey, yeah,
One of them, I was like, oh, we're not beating that record that won, and we didn't. But the other one, I was like, damn.
it's like yeah.
Yeah,
I felt that way this. I mean, like it was Corey's own album, but I was like,
yeah,
when I saw the name afterwards, I was like, oh, well,
yeah. That one, like, man, that his category this year was like every jazz nerd legend right
yeah,
now. So it's
yeah.
like Lewis Cole is amazing, Corey is amazing, Michelle Deggiocello is amazing. Like I think Kurt Elling was the other one, and then there was a
I
fifth
don't
one.
really know. I didn't really know the other people besides Lewis Cole.
I mean, dude, Michelle Deggiocello is like a huge influence of mine. She's a female bass player from New York who is
Hmm.
like, she's a god. She's an
Mm.
incredible.
Right.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
So
man.
I think even Corey was like, okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last question: what do you want to leave with the people? Could be words of encouragement, advice, something you just want to get off your chest. What do you want to? Yeah.
I would encourage. I think there's a lot of you're going to hear the Buddhist in me come out for about 30 seconds, but
Do you
I think
think?
there's a lot of pain in the musical journey. I think like being a
Mm.
musician is hard. Being a musician for money is hard. Like playing, learning how to play is hard. There's all kinds of imposter syndrome. There's all kinds of anxiety, depression. Like there's so many things that come with music. And I think there's like a really powerful way to alleviate some of that, and it's to like connect with the joy that it's giving to other people. And
Mm.
this is again, this can be a slippery slope because you don't want to make everything you do about external validation, but it's not really external validation I'm talking about. It's more about
Mm.
like the world needs more joy, period.
Mm.
And the at least with my personal experience, the moment that I stopped worrying about what I was doing wrong or what I didn't have or like even how I felt in like a physical sense or a mental sense or something and tried to connect more with like damn, look at what I'm giving to this person who's like having a blast in the front row. Look at what I'm giving to this student who, yeah, we had like a paid interaction, but they're like, they have access to information that they wouldn't have had. Like I think that connection to joy is like really fucking powerful.
Mm.
And like life-savingly powerful. And I would just urge people to experiment with it. Like I think it's a really my I hated music for about 3 or 4 years, like during the pandemic and kind of around
Mm.
it. Touring was tough. I went through like a really gnarly divorce and had a lot of personal stuff, and music was at the root of a lot of that for me. And so
Mm.
I didn't play music for like a year and a half, like during the
Oh
pandemic.
wow.
Even at home, I was like, screw this. I'm getting really
Mm.
good at PlayStation. And it wasn't until I came back and my path was slightly spiritual in the sense, but like nonetheless, it led me to connecting with like look at what you're doing for this person. That's an act of service. It's a gift. Even if there's a business interaction, they paid a ticket to come to the show. You don't have to care about them, but caring about them and caring about some interaction that you're giving, like man, it just shifted everything for me. And that's why I said I don't even have bad gigs anymore because even like last Sunday I played a gig that there was a huge rainstorm in LA, like literally 3 people were at, but like all 3 of them were like, damn, this is amazing. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
That means the gig was 100% worth it for me. And it
Nice.
like even if the music would have been bad, the music was great, but even if the music would have been bad, it wouldn't have
Mm.
affected that for me. And I think that can be medicine for all the other shit we deal with. So yeah, I would just
Yeah.
urge people to experiment with it because it's a really powerful antidote to a lot of the stuff that I think is common amongst musicians.
Love that, man. Love that, bro. Socials, where the people can find you.
At Nicholas T. Semrad, I don't tweet anymore. I'm on there for sports stuff, but Instagram, I'm everywhere.
Hmm.
And yeah, keep an eye out. I mean, there's plenty of music coming out this year. some Cory things, I imagine. I'm starting a new group with Mark Juliana that will have
Ooh,
something out, I imagine. Yeah, it's going to be gnarly. And Tayron Lockett and Antoine Katz and I have a trio record coming out that's going to be really freaking good here in like probably 3 or 4 months. So keep an eye out for that too.
nice, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you for being on. Go ahead and check out Nick Semrad on the Lesson GK's album Another World. You can check out his own album Ratio. He's on Cory Henry and the Funk Apostles Operation Funk Live.
And
Um
and and normal Operation Funk.
and the regular Operation Funk and Live in LA and Art of Love. All of those. Nick
Yeah, yeah,
Simrad is on it. But
yeah.
yeah, man, appreciate you for being on. Until next time, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Major Keys podcast. Keep pressing on. We'll see y'all next time.